Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic host of Bachelor Nation News. A relatively slow week here in the Bachelor Empire, which is okay. We always know there's a dramatic story around the corner at any turn. But in the meantime, we just have some simple questions and simple answers here. But interesting things nonetheless, especially for our audience. There's always somebody struggling with a similar issue we like to always discuss. Tia Booth shares her struggles. And then we're also going to have Lauren from Ari and Lauren. She shares some information on her Q&A, and you might be surprised. I certainly was. There is some depth to Lauren that she doesn't always share with her audience, but when we get it, we love to see it. So we'll get into that story and Tia's right now. So Tia did a Q&A. She's talked about the struggles that she has. Of course, we all know influencer life's not perfect, but at the same time, you know, algorithms do a very good job of sharing us the best, most beautiful, highest quality camera curated content with original games and couples being the cutest, and life's just not always so simple. So we'll share a few of those comments here. First, let's go into Lauren. So we'll get to Tia Booth in a second. But someone asked Lauren a question. Would you ever consider getting implants? 4 kids over here, and mama needs some help. Her response was, yeah, I actually have implants, and I like them. I think they look supernatural. I thought my boobs were perfect before kids, but after the twins, they disappeared completely. So here we are, LOL, but no regrets. And there's Lauren. I don't know. This was from 15 weeks ago. She didn't mention on the timeline when she got implants. But hey, I always say whatever makes you feel good and happy. Of course, we've covered folks like Claire Crowley who had breast implant illness. I guess it would be just the type of thing you look out for. Maybe some people's implants take and some don't. My guess is that implant illness is not dependent on size of the implant, that does your body treat your implants as a foreign object or not? And if it does, maybe that makes your life a living hell. So I'm sure she's aware of all these things. You don't need to hear from old Dave over here, but good for her. And then here's an interesting one from Lauren. Someone said, make sure to raise your son with strong masculinity. Here's her response. I just have to say it. It gets under my skin seeing comments like this. Let's let kids be kids. If he wants to wear mermaid tails because his sisters do, so be it. If he's attached to his mama, I'll snuggle him and baby him every day until he doesn't want me to anymore. I don't parent based on fear. Also, I've known plenty of men in my lifetime who are raised to be strong and masculine, and they have trouble expressing themselves, communicating, and they develop many other problems in life due to this. Let's stop telling boys they have to be strong and masculine if they want to be accepted by society. Wow, Lauren, how amazing of a comment there. Now, look, I was raised by a single mom, and she was loving and, all the things that a mom's supposed to be. I had uncles I looked up to for their masculinity, and I understand the idea of toxic masculinity. They didn't use toxic masculinity here. I understand why some people hear toxic masculinity and just say masculinity. Masculinity comes in all different ways. It's not toxic at all. There's an element that could be toxic, like man up, don't cry, you little bitch. You know what I mean? That's like, sorry, Dad. I've seen guys overly parented by their fathers in Little League crying on the mound playing baseball because their dad expects them to be something they aren't capable of. And boy, does that lead to a disaster. We've all seen the spectrum, right? But I believe if I had kids, I would probably completely agree with Lauren here that you want them to be comfortable in their own skin, first and foremost. Don't be afraid if you play with dolls. That's rubbish. Who the hell cares what your kid plays with? Don't make them feel inadequate in any way whatsoever. Maybe they want to be a mermaid or a merboy. Like she said, who cares, right? So good on her. Very progressive stance there. Or maybe it's not progressive at all, but one that we're happy to see by Lauren. All right. Let's get into Tia here. And again, look, why are you even making content if there's nothing to make? I'm just chatting with you folks. It's a slow day, baby. I'm actually going to be heading over to the other side of town. I'm going to be crossing an island to go see one Jared from Bachelor in Paradise for the next episode of Driving with Dave. Will Ashley join us on Driving with Dave? We'll have to see. Let's just say I'm geared up. I brought all my cameras, and I am so excited to talk to a fellow charming Rhode Islander, because that's what we are in Rhode Island. Charming. I don't know if you knew that. Are you still charming when you have to tell someone? Yes, it's the charming thing to do, to tell someone how charming you are. All right, we have Tia Booth. She's with Tay, and they had a kid named Tatum. That's all you need to know. How are you and Tay? How's your relationship since having Tatum? She said, love you. I'll be honest, it's harder than ever before. Less one-on-one time, less quality time, less communication, more stress. But we're trying to work on it because it's worth it. And of course, that's scary. It's scary to think that you could bring in, a beautiful miracle and then it could tear your relationship apart. I guess kids are just another example of a hurdle that you have to face in your relationship. You have to get over that. I always say the first hurdle you face in your relationship, like real hurdle, might be moving in together depending on your timeline, but it also might be getting married, communicating through the planning process of marriage and all of the logistics of making sure I'll always say this. One of the ways we build trust in my family is my wife knows how important my family is to me. And of course, I know how important her family is to her, and we share the family together and all these things. But it's important to go to bat for each other, right? So there was a time, I'll share a story with you since we have time to kill here. But the night before our wedding, my wife, we were in Mexico. We had 55 people there. Not a huge crowd, but a crowd. And the next morning, the morning of the wedding, there was all the hair and makeup ladies coming. And they had, none for me, by the way. They forced me to do my own hair and makeup. I tell you what, we survived. It was a little humid, but your boy had some Moroccan oil and a prayer. So they had to get their hair and makeup done. They shoot on a couple eyelashes. They brick on the cake. The first cake cutting ceremony is not the wedding cake. It's trying to wipe the bronzer off the face. The point is what is the point? Oh, so it was the night before the wedding, and we were getting ready to go out to dinner, but everywhere we had to go, every turn at the resort, in order to get back home, we ran into relatives, and we had to talk to them, and it became very difficult to get anywhere because we were just the center of attention, which we loved, right? But it was very exhausting. And then my wife was about a half an hour late for dinner, and she was still organizing certain things that needed to be organized to get the hair and makeup team ready the next morning. And I saw her, and she was doing it all, and she was doing great. And I knew I couldn't help her because it was content that was out of my element. And I called Tasha, my wife's sister, Chelsea, and I said, "You need to get over here. Tasha's needs help. She's she needs your support." And my wife wasn't the type that was going to reach out to anybody, but I just saw that in her. I saw that moment where I was like, she needs help. She needs support, and I'm going to help her get that right now. I feel like that's what it must be like when you have a kid, to know when your partner's burnt out, even if they don't want to admit it. Know when they need a break and they need, whatever kind of assistance, love, quality time, and those things. So she says here, Tia, that she gets less quality time, less one-on-one time, and more stress and all these things, which is going to happen regardless of the amount of support you have in this and that. My only hope is that you can learn to communicate in a way that you don't feel like the giving tree where you're down to a stump. You know what I mean? And that's when you've, tried to do it all yourself. And who knows? I don't really know what Tay does. Maybe he's got a great job and maybe he's supportive. Maybe he's staying at home. I have really no idea. But we wish her the best, Tia. How are you doing? Feel like we haven't seen much of you lately. She said, I think I've been in a state of disassociation. So it's very brave of her to be sharing all these things, but also kind of scary because it's like, we want the best for the people we like in our community. We want them to be as happy as possible. She said, I feel uninspired. I don't do anything for myself, only work. Tatum, my household, mindless scrolling in comparison, going through the motions, I guess. Wondering how other people get so much done in 24 hours and I can barely do shit. I have to, Tia, again, advice from a guy who doesn't have a kid probably doesn't mean much, but I think when life is maxed out, you have to just get as efficient as possible. You have to sharpen the knife, as it were. And mindless scrolling in comparison is not part of your job duties as a mom. Find a way to cut that out. That is the aspect of the cell phone that will drain you of your dopamine. I mean, just It is an energy vacuum. If you're scrolling for more than 15 minutes, which, by the way, 15 minutes sounds like a lot, but we all know you might be 2.5 hours into a scroll. You know, I was talking about this to someone who's a speech pathologist the other day, because, of course, coming off of COVID and kids, I'm not, maybe not seeing their parents' face as much and all these other issues. Speech pathologists has been they've been trying to reckon with kids not developing fast enough, and we talked about people when they're breastfeeding maybe not looking at their kids as much as they used to because maybe they're on their cell phones. Maybe you're breastfeeding right now. Look at your kid in the eyes. I don't have any science behind it. Maybe there's some communication that's transferred with the longer eye contact you make with your baby. Maybe it's good for bonding. All these other things I don't know about, but I can tell you this: mindless scrolling. And Tia's she's admitting it to us right now. She's saying it's mindless scrolling. That type of rumination will drain you of your dopamine, your feel-good drug. You will be left empty afterwards, and you'll be wondering why. And now we know why. It's because you're comparing yourself to others, and comparison is the thief of joy. The question was, is it harder in the market now for influencers? Are influencers competitive with each other? She said, it's hard to be original. Even as an influencer, I consume a lot of content from other influencers and am influenced by it, whether I realize it or not. A lot of overlap in followers, so you probably feel like you're seeing the same thing all the time. Like I said, I follow a lot of them too, so I'm saying this as a consumer. Competition, yes, in a sense, because we work for brands, but also a lot of support. So yeah, I mean, these are issues that you can only imagine. She's being a mom and trying to do motherly things, and then having some skinny tea you got to promote. It pays the bills though, folks. It pays the bills. So it's probably better. Not to say, well, my mom, but in my day, my mom she did sales. She had to be on the road. We didn't see much of her. You know what I mean? She was a single mom with no child support. And not to say one person's issues are worse than the other, but I guess if you could look at the joy and the optimism of the fact that your job provides you a lot of money, I'm assuming, I'm sure she does very well, and she gets to stay with her kid. But that's also a curse because you don't get away from your kid as much. So you have to spend the extra time making sure you're out there taking care of yourself. She said, I hate using this as an excuse, but it explains a lot. And someone said, I've noticed the same feeling after losing my dad this year and planning a wedding. It's a weird stage. She said, so weird, and not many people understand. Would I still have been upset losing my dad at any other stage in life? Of course, but it's extra devastating while planning a wedding you wanted him to be a part of. Add in a child you wanted him to meet, and it's a different level. And again, on a different level myself, I talked yesterday on the podcast and got quite emotional about how disappointed I was that my wife couldn't attend my brother's wedding because she got sick with COVID. And of course, it's on a different level because everyone's fine and healthy now. But it can still be very heartbreaking to know that the plan you had for life isn't necessarily the plan that ended up happening. But we're very happy for Tia for sharing. Of course, she shares in part because I'm sure it feels good to have others relate to her, but also in part because it drives the algorithm. Q&As are very good for the algorithm, which drives more eyeballs to her channel. But for any of I will always say this, for the influencers from Bachelor Nation who might be upset that their audience isn't growing as much, I would just put it in perspective that your audience grew substantially to a level that most people wouldn't dream of. And there's a privilege to that. You were on a TV show that was really popular. You got over 1 million views, not even as a finalist or a lead. And in today's world, you've got triple the amount of views that someone like Charity would have gotten, who was actually the lead of the show. So it's one of those things, you kind of got a little privilege because you just happen to be at the right place in the right time, but now you've got to, find new ways to be creative to hold on to that. I can understand, folks, but either way, Tia, for sharing her mental health issues, I think that is a good thing. We're going to be back later, maybe with more content over here, although today I'm traveling back to the West Coast, so you might see me on my way to Boston tonight before the flight. We'll see you in the lounge. Either way, I will have an episode of Bachelor Rush Hour podcast for you, and I will give you guys a full update on my conversation with Jared after we do our interview. Very much looking forward to that. We'll talk to you all later. Bye, everybody.